these are bad kinds of foods to serve. These are poisonous. If I serve these to my friends will die. They should not eat the mushrooms in my backyard. So in selecting a food to serve at my dinner party, I can choose good foods or I can choose bad foods. In choosing to act, in choosing to do something, I can choose a good kind of action or I can choose a bad kind of action. Now here's the first point. Some kinds of actions are always wrong. Always wrong. As John Paul II puts it, he said this, and so he wrote an encyclical. This is a great encyclical. If you're interested in moral theology and get a little more into it, this is just fantastic. Veritatis Splendor, the splendor of truth. I mean, who can come up with a title like that? I love it. So he says some types of acts are by their nature incapable of being ordered to God because, keep in mind what we talked about at the very beginning, because they are radically contradict the good of the person made in his image. So some actions, no matter how you look at them, they will violate the good of the person who is the recipient of your action. And John Paul II cites this, but the origin of this source is in Gaudium et Spes, which comes from Vatican II. It's the pastoral constitution on the church in the modern world. And it identifies some of the intrinsically evil kinds of actions. So the Gaudium et Spes identifies things that are hostile to life itself: murder, genocide, abortion, euthanasia. It identifies things that violate the integrity of the person, such as torture, or things that offend human dignity, such as arbitrary imprisonment, slavery, prostitution. Here's the take-home point from this notion that some kinds of actions are always wrong. If truth exists, you can make a statement like this. If there is no truth, this kind of statement is crazy talk. However, with the notion that truth exists, with the notion that we can say that yes, there are truths that cut across cultures and times and circumstances, it allows us to stand here in North Carolina and say, slavery is wrong. And everybody goes, well, duh. But it also allows us to say, in North Carolina, in 1800, slavery was wrong. It was legal, it was part of the culture, it was accepted, and it was wrong. Slavery always violates the dignity of the person who is enslaved. And through a Catholic worldview, we can say this with absolute confidence. Culture will never take this away. So some kinds of actions that one might choose, such as enslaving another person, will always be the wrong choice. Does that make sense? Okay. That's point number one. Point number two, whoops, went too far. Point number two is this. So you got to figure out, well, what exactly is it that the person's doing, right? I mean, is like we were talking about the woman with the medical condition, is she treating a medical condition or is she just, stiffing her grandkids? So you got to figure it out. Now, occasionally you can figure it out just by looking, just from the physical perspective of what's going on, you can see the answer. You know what's going on. So for instance, if you were to see an unmarried man and woman engaging in sexual intercourse, there's nothing else that you need to know. That is an intrinsically wrong action, right? However, that's usually not the case. Usually, you need more information. Usually, you can't tell just by looking from the outsider's perspective on whether a given action is good or bad. Here again, as John Paul II says, in order to grasp the object of an act, the what of what someone is doing, he said it is therefore necessary to place oneself in the perspective of the acting person. You got to get inside of the head of the person who's choosing in order to fully understand what they are choosing. Does that make sense? So let me give you an example on this. Yeah, here's the example. This is sort of a classic medical scenario that I'm not sure ever actually happens anymore, but actually, you can see. So imagine two rooms adjacent to each other. In each room is a person with advanced, incurable cancer who is dying in terrible pain. Two identical doctors, each with a syringe of morphine in their hands. Actually, this never happens because doctors don't give medicines in the right orders. Click and point, right orders. So, but in this scenario, doctor with a syringe of morphine, identical doctors, you can't tell them apart, you can't tell the patients apart. Their diseases are exactly the same phase, or exactly the same stage. Physician walks into each room, administers the dose of morphine, and one of the side effects of morphine is that it slows down breathing, and if you give too much, breathing stops, and then you die. In both rooms, breathing is suppressed, and both patients die. Physically, these are identical actions, but you get inside the head of the acting person. What we see in the first room, the physician was going in with this medication to relieve pain. However, one of the side effects of morphine is that it suppresses breathing. As an unintended consequence, principle of double effect, the physician has given this dose of morphine with the intention of relieving pain, but unfortunately what has happened is the side effect of the medication of suppressing respiration has overtaken the patient and they die. Principle of double effect. What is it that this person has done? By getting in their head and seeing it, what you can see is that they have chosen to try to relieve pain. They've done essentially an act of medical care. Right? In the second room, the physician who went in with a morphine intending to kill the patient in order to relieve their pain. So what the physician has done is administered morphine. Oh, by the way, it kills pain, but what the physician is doing is giving enough morphine so that the person stops breathing, dies, and stops feeling pain. What kind of an action is that? Euthanasia. An intrinsically disordered action that, as JP2 says, radically contradicts the good of the person. Physically, two identical actions, but you get inside the perspective of the acting person, and they are radically different. So what you can see here is that in terms of understanding what it is that a person is doing, or understanding what you're doing, you need a fair amount of information to kind of grasp it. And some of the actions that people will choose will always be inherently disordered. Some kinds of actions cannot be reconciled with the good of the person. So, in summary, truth exists. We cannot use evil as a tool for good. The principle of double effect, it's got those 4 criteria, and it's a very useful tool. And then there's this whole concept of evaluating what exactly it is that we're doing. So let me stop there, because I know you guys have a small group, do that, and then when we come back for Q&A, we'll do Q&A. If you want to do scenarios, I've got scenarios, whatever you want to do with your time. Okay?